everyone. I, like a lot of others, had a chance to be at home last week. Won't surprise you to know that everybody's concerned about inflation, food prices, gas prices, and without exception, every employer I ran into, whether it was a large business or a small business, was having difficulty getting people to come back to work. A real dilemma, and I think all of that is a result of the $2 trillion the other guys dumped on the economy last week against the advice of Larry Summers, Jason Furman, and now the Secretary of the Treasury has basically admitted they made a mistake. That's hard to find in this town, so I commend her for admitting they made a mistake, but it was a gargantuan mistake. With regard to the ongoing issue about violence, Senator Cornyn, as you know, is representing our side in discussions with Senator Murphy. We're hoping to actually get an outcome that'll make a difference in the areas of mental health, school safety, and things that are related to the incidents that occurred in Texas and in Buffalo.
So this last week, President Biden came out with a so-called plan to deal with inflation. But what the plan consisted of basically was more blame shifting and finger pointing instead of acknowledging that what really has caused inflation, as the leader pointed out, was the $2 trillion tax and spending spree that the Democrats passed last year on a straight party line, partisan basis. And you would think that after having had that experience that they wouldn't want to double down, because even at that time, you had liberal economists. A lot of us were telling them, warning them that this was going to flood the zone with a lot of spending and dollars out there, and that it would add to the inflationary fires, which it has. And so we've seen now record inflation, the highest inflation in 40 years, record gas prices, which are hitting consumers' pocketbooks every day. And even though the president and his team may talk about job growth and wage growth isn't keeping up with inflation, meaning that people in this country are getting a de facto pay cut because of inflation. So what is the solution to that? Well, the Democrats, they're still trying to revive discussions about the so-called Build Back Better bill, the $5 trillion tax and spending spree, which would be the exact opposite prescription if you were trying to combat inflation. So I'm hopeful that there is going to be at least one wise and thoughtful Democrat out there that will put the brakes on and stop this reckless idea of spending another $5 trillion and start bringing some common sense to how we combat and deal with the issue of inflation, to include an energy policy. Gas prices are exploding, and they are driving a lot of the inflation. And if there's anything that gets the American people's attention, it's the price for a gallon of gas. And this administration ought to figure that out and realize that the way to solve this problem is to allow American energy producers to get off the sidelines, back in the game, and start producing energy right here in the United States, and all of the above strategy that makes America energy independent and takes those pressures off of the gas prices that are literally crushing the pocketbooks of the American people.
In the Joe Biden economy, the American people have suffered through the most expensive Memorial Day ever. Gas prices today on average $4.92 a gallon. That's 30 cents higher a gallon than when we were here 2 weeks ago. And Joe Biden has an opportunity to try to make things differently for all of these people who are having to cancel summer plans, make changes in their life, but he's not doing it. Not at all. Tragically, he's refusing to take the steps needed to help the American people. He is so wedded to the climate extremists that he won't even mention the ideas of drilling for oil and gas in the United States. Instead, he wants to use the Defense Production Act. For what does he want to use it for? Not for pipelines, not for more oil and gas exploration, but for solar panels. Solar panels when the price of gas is approaching $5 a gallon. So today, Secretary Yellen was in the Finance Committee. She may have admitted a week ago that she had gotten it wrong. Today, she was back to the same blame game, blaming inflation on Putin and the pandemic. Families are paying $5,000 a year more this year than last year just to keep up with where they were a year ago. People don't believe the president. They believe their own two eyes and their empty wallets. And then last week we had the Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Energy say, well, if you're not happy with high gas prices, buy an electric vehicle. $55,000, that's sure not working in Wyoming or anywhere across the country. These people are tone deaf, out of touch. But you know, there are Democrats who've wanted high gas prices for a long, long time. Joe Biden, when he was running for president, had said that he guaranteed you he would eliminate fossil fuels. And just last week, once again, this president has come out siding with the environmental extremists and attacking oil and gas leases. He went after them in my home state of Wyoming, a number of western states. They've frozen 2,000 leases in Wyoming with their actions just last week. And these are leases that were granted in 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 2020. So the president has once again taken an axe to American energy. As a result, is chopping into the paychecks of the American people. So when Joe Biden stands up there and he says to the American people he is doing, quote, everything possible to lower the cost of gasoline, the president is lying, and there's no other way to say it.
So a few days ago in Uvalde, Texas, 19 elementary school kids are killed and 2 of their teachers are killed, and all of those families, and in a significant way, that community has changed forever. And of course, that brings the topic of the weapons used, but it also brings the topic of mental health to part of this discussion. I want to say a couple of things about that. One is the last day of October 2013, Senator Stabenow and I had a piece of mental health legislation. We went to the Senate floor and we talked about the last bill that President Kennedy had signed 50 years earlier, 50 years before that date, and it was the Community Mental Health Act. And we went through the Community Mental Health Act, and when we did that, it was obvious that that act was designed to close a lot of facilities that probably needed to be closed, but it was also designed to create a lot of alternatives that never quite got completed. And so for most of that 50 years, the local police and the emergency room have become the de facto mental health system for the country. That's beginning to change, but it can't change as quickly as we should want it to change. You know, we have 41 states now that are part of a program that we developed in legislation we were also talking about that day. 10 states fully in the certified community behavioral health clinic program, and making a difference in those states, and will make a difference to people who are thinking about harming themselves or others. And I think we ought to look at that as one of the things we figure out how to take more advantage of. But even more importantly than that, I'd want to say that everybody with a mental health problem is not dangerous. In fact, people with a mental health problem are more likely to be the victim of a crime than they are the perpetrators of a crime. And while we have this important discussion about mental health, we don't want to do anything as a society that would discourage people from stepping forward and saying, I have a mental health problem and I need help. The National Institute of Health says 1 in 5 adult Americans has a diagnosable and almost always treatable behavioral health issue. We can't give 1 in 5 adult Americans any reason in the world, or all the kids that have mental health challenges after 2 years of COVID and isolation from school. We can't create an environment where any of them are hesitant to step forward because they see themselves as becoming part of a class that's seen as dangerous. But that doesn't mean that mental health isn't also an important part of what we need to do to deal with people who are troubled. And when you deal with people, almost all of these cases involve not just somebody who's decided to do a terrible act involving the lives of other people, but it's probably also almost always purposely decided that this is a way for them to end their own life. And so whether it's suicide or homicide, we need to be stepping in there. But we also need to have a mental health system that people aren't afraid to be part of. And the balance of that in this discussion, I think, is really an important balance to be sure we try and achieve.
This week, President Biden is going to attend the Summit of the Americas out in Los Angeles. During President Biden's time as U.S. Senator, his time as a Vice President, and his time as President, he's never stood up for democracy and freedom in Latin America. It's never been important to him. In the last year and a half since he's been president, he's done nothing to get the peaceful protesters, including teenagers, out of prison. And on basically the Castro regime trying to kill them, he's done nothing to step in. He's taken sanctions off Maduro's family members, corrupt family members. He took the FARC off the list of organizations of terrorism out of Colombia. He won't stand. He doesn't talk about the importance of democracy in Colombia. He's never done anything to fight for the people of Latin America and their freedom. He has the opportunity, when he goes to the Summit of the Americas, to stand up for the first time. His appeasement policies, Obama's appeasement policies, don't work. And let me give you an example. There's a lady I know in Miami. After the Obama appeasement policy, the Castro regime came and chopped off her hand, stuck in the mud, so she would get infected and die. You know what her atrocity was? She complained that her school would be closed in her neighborhood. So this appeasement of these dictators, whether it's Castro, Ortega, Maduro, any of them, is not doing anything to help the people of those countries. We've got to get a president that believes in freedom and democracy and stands up for it. And this is the week that Biden should start doing that.
Yeah, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad.
Are you concerned that if they get an agreement on firearms here, that you're going to have a majority of your caucus that's going to oppose this? There's going to be the Democrats plus a small percentage of Republicans who carry the freight on that. And what does that say about the Republican Party if it is just a small portion of your caucus that's willing to deal?
Well, step one, obviously, is to try to get a bipartisan agreement. Senator Cornyn knows more about this subject than anybody we have in the Senate. He also happens to represent Texas, and I think is working in good faith with Senator Murphy to try to get an outcome. I think it's way too soon to start predicting how many are going to vote for it. We don't have an agreement yet, and so I don't want to speculate about how many of my members might support it. Step one is to try to get a deal. As I've said repeatedly, I hope that'll be sooner rather than later. Everybody would like to, almost everybody I think would like to get an outcome that's definitely related to the subject matter.
Switching to Iran, there has been reports that the U.S. president is going to travel to Saudi Arabia, and then White House seems to have changed the dates of that planned meeting. And now Bloomberg is reporting that when it comes to pushing for more energy production from other countries, Biden administration's options are very limited. One of those options could be looking away from Iran sanction violations. Are you happy with what Biden administration has done in order to increase the oil production around?
Yeah, look on the issue of getting energy production up, it is utterly ridiculous, as Senator Barrasso pointed out, the various ways in which this administration is depressing fossil fuel production in our country. We were not only self-sufficient in 2019, we were exporting, and at the same time going abroad to regimes that many Americans don't care for and asking them to increase production. It really is stunning. The president needs to get our own production up, not only for us, but to deal with the price of oil worldwide.
We've heard from some of the survivors and some of the families of the victims who say that it's time to raise the legal age limit to purchase a semi-automatic rifle. Is that something that you personally would support?
It won't surprise you to know that I'm not going to sit here and try to negotiate the deal with all of you guys. We're waiting to see if we can get an outcome that directly relates to the problem that brought this issue to the fore one more time. I personally would prefer to get an outcome, and I hope that we'll have one sooner rather than later.